Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to part one of my tutorial for the model coding assignment. And all the coding assignments in this course from now on are going to be part of an application that we're building that I call Easy University. It's a simplified university record-keeping system. And in this coding assignment, we're creating the Django model and related parts and testing them. And in this part one, we're just getting started. So we're going to create a proper Anaconda virtual environment. We're going to create a proper Django project with Pycharm. And then we're going to place the project under version control, because that's really what I recommend that you do. So let's get started. Right now we're looking at Anaconda Navigator, and we want to create a new virtual environment for this series of coding assignments related to Easy University. So I'm going to click on the create icon, and we're using Python 3.6, and we're going to call this, we're not using the R packages, we're going to call this E4 underscore easy, not EX, easy underscore university. And this is a fairly common naming convention that I've been using, that when I go back to my environments, at least I know what they're for. And we're going to click on create. And rather than have you watch all this stuff download, I'm going to pause and I'll be back when it's all downloaded. Okay, that was pretty fast. And you'll notice that what we don't have is we don't have Django. So that's not part of what you get in a standard virtual environment. So we're going to use Django 2.1.1, and this is where I tell you I want these tutorials to have a fairly long life. So associated with each of these assignments, I'm going to have a set of instructions. So consult your instructions and make sure that in the current semester we're still using, for instance, Python 3.6, and that we're still using Django 2.1.1. As time goes on, we'll go on to other versions. Okay? And I want you to be installing those. Now, to install Django, we're just going to go to the control and say we want a list of what's not installed. And now we can search and type out Django. And we can see Django is available in version 2.1.1, exactly the version that I want. So I'm going to click that and go down to the lower right and click apply. And it does a little retrieval and says it has to install Django and Python, and that's fine. I'm going to click apply again. And it's going to install Django and related packages. And now I just want to get off of the not installed view. So I'm going to close that. We're still on the not installed, so let's go back to installed. And you can see we have all these. It's not too long. And now we can see we've got Django 2.1.1. Okay. And if we look at Python, we can see that we've got Python 3.6.6, and that's really what we want. So again, be sure to check your instructions to make sure that that's the version we want in your semester. Alright, so that one's done. So what's left is to create a Pycharm Django project. And we've done that before, so we'll do it again. So Pycharm is firing up here. And I want to create a new project. And a couple of things. One is I want to make sure it's the right kind of project. I want to make sure it's a Django project. I want to make sure that it's in the right directory. So this is the directory where I'm keeping my project for the current semester. And I also want to make sure I've got a proper name. I don't want the name untitled. So in our class, the convention for this Django project is going to be last name, first name, easy, university. So for me, it's going to be trainer underscore Kevin underscore easy underscore university. And we're going to leave this project intact, and we're going to keep enhancing it week after week as we do coding assignment after coding assignment. We're not going to change the name every week. This is going to be a fairly stable name. Okay, so two things have to be configured. We have to configure the interpreter to point to the interpreter in the right virtual environment. I can see here that it's in the wrong one. And more settings, those are some of the Django settings. So let's do the interpreter. Okay, we want an existing interpreter. This is not the one that I want. So I'm going to click on the dot button. And over here on the kind of navigation panel, I want to say Conda environment. And I want to go to on the right side of the dot button. And here on the Mac, these files are underneath my user ID. They're in a different place on Windows, and we've covered that in a prior tutorial. But here on the Mac, under my user ID, I find my way to the directory Anaconda 3. And the subdirectory envs for environments, and I'm going to open up E for Easy University, and I'm going to open up bin, and bin's going to have the shortcut file to the Python interpreter, and the best way to do that is to use the shortcut file called Python, and that'll point us to the proper version of Python 3.6, and we're going to say OK. And I usually click that says OK, make available to all projects. I'm a generous guy. And the lower right, I click on OK. So this looks good. Existing interpreter. E for Easy University. We can see it's under the my home directory Anaconda 3. That looks all right. So now I'm going to shrink the interpreter settings. I'm going to expand the more settings, which really it turned out to be the Django language settings. So the template language, we're going to take the default Django. The templates folder, we're going to take the default templates. The application name, we're not going to add the application right now. We're going to wait for that. And we want the box checked that says enable Django admin. So now we're going to create the project. And we're going to see it starting up, and it looks pretty good here. Let's open the top level directory and see what's inside it. So we can see we have a templates folder. We can see we have this internal directory that has the same name as the external one, and that's the convention for these projects that we're following. So that's good. And within that, it has a URLs, a settings, and a WSGI. And all three of those are configuration or URL forwarding files. So they're all going to be the right ones. We have a manage.py. That's good. Now, what don't we have yet? Well, we don't have the database file that we're going to get. We're eventually going to have an SQLite database, okay? And but we haven't gotten there yet. And also, we don't have this thing under version control yet. And before we do, I want to add a Git Ignore file so that I just get the things that I want under version control. So let me go find that file and I'll pull it over here. It's called .gitignore. I'll be right back. So I tell you where I found mine. I tend to go back to prior Django projects I've worked on that are under Git version control, and I copy it. And so I just went back to the Django Girls tutorial extensions project that I had. And I've set up in my operating system so I can see hidden files and directories. And .gitignore is one of the hidden files and directories. And so now I've copied that, and now I'm just going to take that .gitignore file and I'm going to paste it on our project. And it asks me, do I want to call it the same thing? Yeah, I do, because that's a significant name, and so you can see it there. And let's open that up and see the list of files that the Django Girls people wanted to not put under version control. So they didn't want to put the bytecode files under version control. They didn't want the conventional virtual environment that they had under this directory. They didn't want to put that under version control. We have a different virtual environment, so I'm just going to take that out of there. Our virtual environment is not under our project directory. They didn't want to have the aggregation of the static files under version control, and that's fine. I don't want to do that either. One thing that they do have, they're saying they don't want to put under version control, is the file for the Sqlite database. And I like to keep that under version control because I sometimes like, when I'm working on the development, to go back to a prior version and see the state of everything, see the state of the code, and I'd also like to see the state of the database at that point. So I'm going to actually keep db.sqlite3 under version control, and so it's not going to be in the ignore file. So when I get done, the ignore file looks like that. Okay, and just make sure that's all saved, and that's fine. So I want to just one thing, and then I'll be ready to put this under version control, and I'll be right back. You know, actually, I think we should do that together. So I kind of encourage my students to work with Git, and I encourage them to download and learn the source tree Git client, and that's what I use. And what I want to do is I want to create a repository for this, and what I want to do is I'm also going to want to add it to my remote repository, but I want to make sure that right now that source tree is pointing at the right account that I have on Bitbucket. So I'm going to check preferences and look at my accounts, and it's going to put it up on my account for UWM, which is not what I want. And I like to keep my courseware on this Ligent Bitbucket account. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight that and set that as the default. Okay, so that means if I go out and create a remote repository, it's going to use that account, which is what I want. Okay, if you're only dealing with a single account, you don't have any issue here. Okay, and now the next thing that I want to do is I want to create a local repository. So how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to find my file for my project. I'm going to find the directory, and here it is. It's in the right directory. It's called Trainer Kevin Easy University, and to add it to source tree and turn this directory into a Git repository, I'm just going to pull this over onto the Git client, and it's going to ask me, do I want to create a local repository? Yes, I do. What do I want to call it? Well, I want to call it Trainer Kevin Easy University. Type Git. Also create a remote repository. Well, now that I know that it's going to use the right account, I'm confident it's going to put it in the right spot. So I click that and I say yes. And I create. And so do we want a description optional? No, I don't think so. The account is Bitbucket, the Ligent account. That's good. That all looks good. It has my credentials within the Bitbucket client. So we're just going to say create, and it creates it, and everything's fine. Okay, but I just want to point out that we've created the local repository, and we've created a remote repository, but we haven't done two important things. We haven't committed we haven't done our initial commit on the local repository, so we're going to do that, and then we need to push to the remote. So I'm going to go to my file status page. These are all my files that I want to put under version control, including the .git ignore file. And so I do that, and I click and I say I want to commit, and I'm just going to call this initial commit, and I'm going to click the commit button, and that's worked fine. Okay, and now we're going to need to push. So let's go to the history page, and we can see we do have an initial commit, and let's click on push. And here's a problem that I get into sometimes with Bitbucket. It's not sure what branch I want to push, and typically I'm only working on the master branch in these courses. So I click on the master branch. Yeah, that's what I want to push, and I click OK. And now I have it under version control, and I have a copy of it up at the Bitbucket remote repository, and I can have a lot of bad things happen to my laptop, for instance, and I still am going to be able to recover the most recently committed version or a prior version of this project. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. I want to point out that in source tree, there is a source tree client for Git. And if you go up to VCS, Version Control System, there's a lot of things that you can do. You can commit, you can do all these things. The VCS operations pop-up is pretty popular. From there, you can do things like a commit, you can do a push, you can do all those kinds of things. I personally vacillate back and forth between doing my commits right here in Pycharm or going over to source tree. The nature of Git is that the state of the repository is kept in the metadata for Git. And so you can use one client, then the other client, then the first client again, then the other client, and you're just fine. Each operation that you do is pretty well independent and atomic, and you can just decide which of the clients, which of the Git clients you want to use for what purposes. You can use the source tree Git client for everything and not fool with source tree, or vice versa. Okay. So this is a great place for us to stop on part 1. I'll see you again on part 2. Bye bye.